In the press conferences that I've given over the years, that today I'm actually giving a press conference which the fourth estate and the Sunshine Coast should be absolutely and utterly focused on. In fact, the people of the Sunshine Coast should be absolutely and utterly focused on, because today I'm talking about the media's job, I'm talking about your jobs, I'm talking about your future, I'm talking about your local media content. We have a chaotic government. We have a chaotic, stumbling, bumbling Minister Conroy, an out-of-control Ms Gillard, and totally and utterly out of his depth Mr Swan, and you have new media rules. What they are going to bring about for so many of us in regional Australia is both centralisation back to urban capitals and also censorship of what you say. Centralisation, because what this will allow is the big city-based media interests to buy up their regional interests, and of course they will get economies of scale by shutting down the regional branches and moving them to Brisbane and Sydney. All they can do then is they can do from Sydney insert a small bit of local content and call that local content looked after. I want to know how we go about ventilating this issue so we can properly protect the people of the Sunshine Coast, the people of the Gold Coast, the people of North Queensland. So we need a committee hearing. But we're not having a committee hearing. This morning I participated on one, so help me, it was on a phone. We had a phone hookup. They couldn't even organise the committee hearing in Canberra. So we did it over the phone. I was on the street at Mooloolaba. How unprofessional is this? And now, have you been asked to turn up to a hearing? Do you know about this hearing? Have they informed any person from the media or from the Sunshine Coast that this hearing is on? No, they haven't. But we're voting for this, possibly by the end of next week. So by the end of next week, we could have a dramatic effect on the media issues of the Sunshine Coast, on the jobs employed by people in the media on the Sunshine Coast, and they don't even have the dignity to come out to areas such as this, to Mooloolaba, out to my areas, to St George, up to North, to Townsville, to Bundaberg, to Rockhampton, and actually have the committee hearings in those areas, because it's actually about these people's lives, these people's jobs, these regional areas, and making sure that they get a fair hearing. I think that if you want an example of just how chaotic the running of our nation has become, a nation who even in this week has borrowed another $1.5 billion, then you'll get no better example than these ridiculous media laws. It is about centralisation for media, for regional people. It's about censorship for our nation. It's about a stumbling, bumbling, fumbling Minister Conroy and Ms Gillard, who's completely and utterly lost the plot, and a completely and utterly incompetent Mr Swan. What's behind the haze, who knows, but I would suggest that it's Minister Conroy has had his bee in his bonnet because he believes he's been unfairly dealt with by certain sections of the media, and so has Ms Gillard. But the only reason they've been unfairly dealt with is because they've just created one mess up after another mess up after another mess up. And when people continue to create mess ups, surprisingly enough, the media keeps reporting the mess ups. Now, I ask, if they were a competent government, they wouldn't have problems with the media. And we all have bad days with the media. Gosh, I've had a few. You just roll the punches and get over it and move on to the next one. You don't come out and say, well, because I've been treated unfairly, I'm going to try and censor it. And they're appointing their person as oversight to be the ultimate arbiter of whether certain things are seen as fair, as independent, as impartial. But the government will be the judge of it. And of course, they've got a vested interest to make sure they protect their interests. But more importantly, for regional people, this is about centralisation. This is about shutting down regional television stations and moving them to their capital cities. Doing that, you've got to remember, we only got this legislation ourselves about 24 hours ago. So this has been absurd. You would never, ever, no competent organisation would ever do this to a nation. And you can't foist on the Australian people a major piece of legislation, hold a gun to their head and tell everybody that you're going to be voting on it by Thursday next week.